Who This is the Passport Bro Wingman coming at you again with another video. And the title of this video is how will Passport Bros deal with the foreign men that want them out of their country. Now, this is somewhat of a controversial video, but I just kind of want to touch on it a little bit because sometimes people think about things like what happens when Americans flood certain countries, like how do they think some of the men there feel. And so I kind of wanted to talk about this a little bit and kind of give my take on it and kind of help people think a little bit deeply about this. So a few things. Let's just choose a random country in particular. Let's say Brazil. So let's say that a bunch of Americans go there. They're dating all the women. People start to think like, okay, so do some of these men feel somewhat hostile towards the men, towards like the Americans? Like, how does that whole dynamic work out? A few things to consider. First off, in most of these countries, especially in Latin America, there is a higher percentage of women than there are of men. Some of the men are, a good percentage of them have either died off. They're in the like military, army, that kind of thing. They've a lot of them in general do things like travel to different countries looking for work. So you have that going on. Some might be in jail, but either way, there's there's almost like a what do you call it? There's a gap between the number of men versus the number of women. So that's one thing. You also got to consider that there is an abundance of single mothers within the country as well. And some men, regardless if they're foreign or even American, or some men in general, don't deal with some of the single women. So a lot of times, some of the men there who have daughters, who have children, and that kind of thing, sometimes they look towards like American men, Western men, to kind of come down and wife up some of their daughters and that kind of thing. Also consider that once when I went to Thailand, and this happens in not just Thailand but various countries as well. I remember once I was taking a cab ride, and as me and the cab driver was talking, he asked me if I was single, if I was dating anybody, and I told him at the time I was single, I wasn't with anybody. So he said, "Are you looking for like any girls? Are you interested? Are you open to dating?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm open to dating." And so he said, so he pretty much took out his phone and he kind of showed me a picture of his daughter, and he said, would you be interested in kind of talking to her? So he asked me what was my Facebook, page. I gave my Facebook page, and he added me as a friend, and he told me he wanted me to try to contact her. So which I didn't, but here's the thing. I said that to say that you will be surprised in some of these countries, some of the men will actually approach you and even try to sometimes introduce you to their daughter. I remember there's a channel called Brazil Yesh on YouTube. Shout out to Brazil Yesh. He has a very, very good YouTube channel. And he mentioned once in Brazil, he was just walking, and I guess one of the Brazilian guys, it was an older guy, noticed that, he could kind of tell by the way he was walking and dressing that he wasn't from there. They had a casual conversation, and Yesh said at first he tried to act like he was Brazilian because he didn't want to, and then the guy asked him about what he does in America, so he kind of downplayed it and just said things like, "Oh, I'm just a dishwasher," that kind of thing. And in spite of that, the guy kept encouraging him that he has a few daughters that he would like him to meet. So what I'm saying to you is the dynamic between the American man and some of the foreign men is not always adversary. Not to say that there aren't men that are jealous, because I'm going to give you some examples of that as well. But what I am saying is that not all the men there are necessarily hostile towards American, Canadian, European men, men of means coming there, because they, in many cases, these are the type of men that can bring stability to, the lives of, their daughters. Because keep in mind as well, when you wife up someone's daughter there, the other thing that happens is, especially if you go back to your country, there's a thing called chain migration, in which the family feels, okay, so now that my daughter's there, she can now bring her mom, she can now bring her dad, she can now bring like aunts, cousins. So it makes the whole process even easier. So to some degree, some of the foreigners there actually are happy when they actually see you as a Western man dating dating their daughter and showing interest. their biggest concern a lot of times is just that you're not just trying to, be a player and just use her up and leave her with a baby or something to that effect. So keep that in mind. So you, as I said before, you actually have men that will actually introduce you to some of the women in their family, their cousins, that kind of thing. So you have that going on. Also keep in mind that many countries such as Jamaica, Brazil, Colombia, Cuba, a lot of these countries thrive on tourism. They thrive on tourism. So when you actually go to these countries, they're going to make sure that you're safe, that nobody bothers you, you enjoy yourself. They want you spending as much money as you can, buying products and everything else. Anytime a tourist in some of these countries gets harmed or hurt, that heavily affects their economy. So they don't want any part of that. They don't want any part of that. And specifically, you can look this up. In Cuba, if a Cuban person there harms a foreigner or a tourist, they have a harsh penalty for that person. I think they were saying like 20 years or something like that. Harsh penalty, because their economy really depends on it. Our dollar is so strong. And in many cases, as you know, with the U.S. military going throughout the world, in many cases, I hate to say it, but the U.S. government has destabilized a lot of these countries anyway. So in many cases, these countries are just barely getting by, and they really, really need tourists there. In fact, if you remember back during the COVID situation, even though all the other countries were closed to tourism, Jamaica was still open, Mexico was still open. Even recently, even while we were still going through the COVID situation, Cuba just suddenly scratched their COVID restrictions as far as you having to have a test. I believe it was you didn't need the PCR anymore. You just needed to take like a little antigen test. It was like 20 minutes. But they severely, because at one point they had it where you were quarantined, they completely got rid of that because the Cuban peso had fell so low. They really needed tourists there. Not only that, the men and the women there, as I said before, in a lot of these countries, there's high unemployment. They know when tourists come there, we buy things, we buy products, we go to restaurants. And especially in Cuba, they really thrive on customers coming to their restaurants and eating. So if you're going to be there, you're American, you're buying some of the most expensive stuff, you're buying steaks, they're going to make sure you have a good time. They're not going to bother you. And that being said, a lot of the men there, they recognize that. They recognize that you're bringing American dollars there. You're helping their economy. You're helping build jobs. So for that reason, a lot of men there don't necessarily look at you from an adversary perspective. Now, on another note, is there a segment of men there that don't necessarily want you there and kind of are jealous or hate it? Of course. For example, there were stories in Ukraine. In Ukraine, they're very big on like the quote-unquote mail order bride industry. And I'm going to make a video about that as well. But anyway, during that time when they were very big there were stories about American men and sometimes men from Western Europe traveling there, and actually sometimes they would get chased out of town by some of the foreign men there. Now, eventually over time, the government cracked down on that, and I'm not sure if some people got arrested, but either way, I know it completely changed. The culture there completely changed. I believe the reason for that is when they saw how that kind of affected their economy, the government was going to lose European dollar. They're not going to use the British pound coming over there. They're not going to lose the U.S. dollar. They're going to need those people coming there. Even people who criticize even sex tourism to a certain degree, even though it is looked down upon, consider that many of these countries, if it wasn't for even some of the sex tourists, a lot of their economies would collapse. That's why, if you think about it, if it's so bad, why don't they just stop it? It's for that exact reason, because their economies kind of depend on it, so they can't. It's the same reason why in Thailand, quote unquote, supposedly prostitution there is supposed to be illegal, but you'll find out it's not. You will say, how is it that they keep closing down, the red light district there, but then it just reopens like the next day? It's because they can't just broadcast. They have to act like they're doing something, but they technically need it. That's the biggest thing. So what I'm saying is, a lot of times when foreigners are coming there, they're not looking at you necessarily as an adversary. You actually help the economy. And in many cases, for guys that have daughters who are looking at the country and saying there's not much opportunity here, but here's a guy who likes my daughter. It seems that he's not a pervert. He's a gentleman. Because as we know, unfortunately, American women have beat us down so much. We kind of have a lot of a lot of some, very like almost timid when it comes to dealing with some of the women. And the men there, they can easily sense it, and the women as well too. They can just sense that there's that we're very gentle in treatment with them, because you'll hear about stories such as like femicide in some of these countries, in which the man in some cases are very, very harsh with their women there. So that's why they can truly appreciate American men there with their gentle spirit, and just we just treat the women well. So the other thing is, there was an example I believe in Colombia, and I think the city was Barranquilla. It was an American guy there. He went down there with some retirement money. He was going to set up a shop there, a cooking shop, and he was going to set up a restaurant. He was going to set up the restaurant there, and as he was trying to buy the property, I guess some people related to the owner, they wound up killing the guy. They took the guy's money and then they wound up killing him. Now, my suspicion is that these group of people were very jealous. Sometimes there is a segment there that is like jealous. They see that you're down there, you got your American dollar. They feel like you're enjoying the best of their country. You're dealing with their women, and some men, they don't like it. So you will occasionally here or there see, because in my opinion, this is somewhat of a hate crime. I think it was just the locals there were jealous that they had this guy coming down there, and he right out bought the property, and he was living well, and they didn't really like seeing that, because a lot of them there, they work really hard and they barely make enough. So sometimes they see Americans go to restaurants that they themselves can't really afford to go to. So as a result, there is a segment there that does not necessarily want you there. But here's my tips in dealing with them. This is what I do. I always carry myself respectfully in any country I go to. I'm not there flamboyant, showing off. I'm not trying to make anyone feel, I have a very humble spirit when I'm dealing with people. I never make them feel like, I never try to belittle them, belittle any of their achievements, anything about their country, anything about the way they dress. I always carry myself in a very respectful manner. I encourage most people who travel to do the same, because what we don't want is the dumb American stereotype spreading throughout the world. For example, when the World Cup came in Brazil, you heard all types of stories about so many Americans with such an arrogant attitude, treating the workers like trash. And it just really leaves a bad taste in some of the people's mouth. And I try to avoid doing that. I treat everyone respectfully. I tip well. Even beggars on the street, sometimes they approach me. I throw them like a few pesos just to, just to be friendly, that kind of thing. I never have like an attitude with any people. Sometimes people walk up to me, they just start talking to me. I talk to them. So I would just say, so that being said, I could go on and on about this whole topic, but let me just kind of end it here. In general, you're not going to be seen as from an adversary perspective. There's many pluses to you being in their country, and many countries would love to have you there. And I could tell you that if you were to leave some of these countries, Americans in general just said, we're not going to go there, we'll stay home. Even Western men, it would completely devastate some of these countries. So I just want you to understand that. Now, I'm not going over there bragging and showing them off and making them feel like, because I don't do that. I'm not going to come over there in such an arrogant manner. But I do understand that I am a guest in their country. I carry myself like a guest. When I'm served, when I went with one of my friends who was Ecuadorian, and I visited her family, I ate everything on a plate to make them feel like I don't have anything against them in the way they cook. I just always carry myself respectfully. I just encourage all passport bros to carry themselves the same way, respectfully, not in an arrogant manner, following the laws of that country. Not trying to make all Americans, especially passport bros, look bad. So on that note, I'm going to end this. But tell me what you think in the comment. Tell me your opinion about this whole situation. Please subscribe to my channel, hit the notification bell, hit the thumbs up button. And until next time, this is your passport bro wingman signing off.